Happy 20th anniversary, Crash Bandicoot, and what a bumpy ride it's been. Although there aren't any individual titles in the series that are considered the worst game ever made, like Sonic 06 or Hotel Mario, the series hasn't exactly been treated with the most respect. After Naughty Dog brought the Bandicoot into the gaming spotlight in 1996, it became an instant hit and the face of PlayStation in the late 90s. But after the series went cross-platform, it went downhill from there. Games were released by several different publishers, the quality wasn't on par with Naughty Dog's titles, and there hasn't been another game in the series since Nitro Kart 2 from the mobile in 2010. The Crash Bandicoot franchise is currently owned by Activision and pretend it didn't exist. Until 2016, when Crash made an appearance in Uncharted 4, and Sony announced a partnership with Activision at E3 to remake the PS1 trilogy. I'm still feeling sour over the fact they're not being developed by Naughty Dog. Could this be a comeback for the goofy animal? I don't know yet. But for this review, the more important question is, how did it all begin? After Naughty Dog completed Way of the Warrior for the 3DO, Universal Interactive signed the developer to a 3-game deal. Game designers Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin noticed that games were transitioning into 3D and decided to combine it with their love for platformers. Now this was before Super Mario 64 was released, so they were thinking ahead of the curve at the time. This was jokingly named Sonic's Arse Game, as the camera view would look at the character mostly from behind. Naughty Dog took inspiration from how Warner Brothers and Sega took an animal that was fairly unknown and made it popular. After a bit of research, different design ideas for the protagonist included a wombat, a potoroo, and a bandicoot. The original title was Willy the Wombat, which sounds like one of Blinky Bill's sidekicks, but Naughty Dog knew they had to change it eventually to avoid lawsuit, as there was already a cartoon character named Willy the Wombat on Tasmania. The game nearly banished from the universe after the way the game was treated prior to release. Universal promoted this new game like it was theirs, without any mention of Naughty Dog, and the developers weren't even allowed at E3. If Sony did that today, it would be one of the dumbest decisions they could possibly make. Jason Rubin rightfully responded by handing out over 1,000 flyers at the Crash Bandicoot display at E3, acknowledging they made the game. Even the game's title created conflict between the two. The Universal marketing director wanted names like Wozzle, Wez, Wezzy the Wombat, or Ozzy the Otzel. But they finally concluded with Crash Bandicoot after the developers threatened to walk out on the game altogether. We think it was the right choice. Well, firstly, this came out in 1996. It looks pretty good for an early PlayStation 1 game. It's hard to tell what's going on once you start the game. There's no cutscene, just a level selection, and you're thrown straight into the action. From what I can gather through the internet, Dr Neo Cortex is transforming animals to be his powerful minions, and Crash Bandicoot was just another subject before it went horribly wrong. Crash was able to escape through a window, but during his time in captivity, he felt a connection towards a female Bandicoot named Torna, and wants to rescue her. Oh, and defeat Cortex. Crash travels through several fictional islands in Southeast Australia, taking down minions one by one to reach Cortex's headquarters. To be honest, I can't tell if I like this or not, because if I was playing this back when it was new, I wouldn't have cared one bit. I certainly couldn't have figured it out today if not for the internet. Did I mention it's a platformer? Who cares about the story for that genre? Okay, there are exceptions.
Oh shit!
Because it's set on islands where colourful art direction comes first, everything has a jungle feel to the soundtrack, animals, and level designs. The placement of platforms and enemies undeniably provide a real challenge. It also takes place in a castle and a power plant ran by Cortex, which are pretty cool supervillain satires. And that's what makes the look of the original Crash Bandicoot age so well. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Even the design of Crash is likable, despite having no neck. The game artist designed it like this so the PlayStation didn't have to render as many polygons at once. Dr Neo Cortex looks like something you'd expect from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So does Torna for that matter. This would also be her only major appearance in the series, as the Universal marketing director hated the look, which forced Naughty Dog to redesign her. Then they decided to scrap the character altogether and make Coco the female face of the series instead. So it has a look that surprisingly stands out from most PlayStation 1 games today. So far, so good, but playing it is a completely different story. Okay, it's been years since I played Crash Bandicoot, and the gameplay is beginning to suffer from arthritis. You can't control the camera for one thing. It ranges from a tight 3D rail, 2.5D areas, being chased by boulders and riding hogs, so it has the variety. It was an open world, so the system didn't have to work as hard to render all these CD-powered graphics. It does feel a little bit like Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo, only in 3D, but nothing like Donkey Kong 64. That's the best explanation I can come up with. Crash can jump and spin attack. That's about it. Nope, he can't body slam yet, which I also want to do. What did I say about the level designs? That they provide a real challenge? Well, it would, if the controls weren't horrible. It doesn't help the fact that you can only use the D-pad, which means movement is all or nothing. Small thing, if you're moving then use the spin attack, you let go of the D-pad, you still move a little bit, which can leave you vulnerable to a falling death while trying to attack an enemy. Ooh, that was a close one. Plus, when you ride a hog on this stage, it runs at an inconsistent speed and it moves left and right so slowly. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt because analog controls weren't released until 1997. What I can't forgive is the hit detection, which I don't even need to explain. Probably the worst thing about Crash Bandicoot. This feels like the sort of thing that belongs on a Sega Saturn, and that's because the developers considered it, but opted to release Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation exclusively as the Saturn's technology wasn't good enough, and the Nintendo 64 would cost too much to distribute. I can definitely agree with the latter. Also, Sony didn't have a true mascot at the time, and Naughty Dog wanted to create one for them. Still, a better mascot than Polygon Man. How do you make a video game out of this? The levels are scattered with crates. They were originally meant to fill the gaps that felt boring or empty. The PlayStation can only render so many sprites at once. But because it was such a basic sprite, it's used for item collecting instead and is now a staple in the series. Inside these crates are either Wumpa Fruit, Extra Lives, Aku Aku, which gives you a hit point, and Torna tokens. 3 of them send you to a bonus stage, which gives you an opportunity to collect more Wumpa Fruit, lives, and a chance to save. You know, I always found that really screwed up, the way it saves. It can be done on the bonus stages and whenever you earn a gem by smashing every box on a level. What's wrong with saving your progress with a pause menu? That can be a huge problem if you're struggling through the game, barely completing each level, which is understandable considering how hard it is, because if you go through a dozen levels, lose all your lives, you go right back to where it was saved. Worst case scenario, it has a password system too. I assume memory cards were too expensive back in 1996. 100 Wumpa Fruit gives you an extra life, and collecting 3 Aku Akus in a row give you a brief invincibility. Out of my way, animals, this Bandicoot is possessed. Aku Aku is nothing more than just a power-up and wouldn't play a key role as a character until Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. As a casual platformer where your mindset is to reach from point A to B and beating the final boss means completing the game, it's pretty difficult but mostly for the wrong reasons. On the flip side, the boss battles are incredibly easy. It's a case of rinse and repeat once you know the pattern because the difficulty curve barely changes each time you attack. I managed to beat Cortex on my first attempt. If you're the 100% trophy hunting completionist, then it will drive you crazy. This is because in order to collect a gem, you have to go through the entire level, not only smashing every single crate, but not die once. If that happens, all the crates respawn and you might as well exit level and restart. I'm going to assume it's a glitch because later titles fortunately don't have that.
What have I got?
I really have grown up, because I used to like this game as a kid, but now, the controls are way too unresponsive for my liking. It feels like there's not much I can do. I can understand why it's not in this, but having no analog movement without question brings the frustration levels to 11. Crash Bandicoot gets a 6 out of 10. It's a shame because everything else is fantastic. It's not virtually unplayable, I just didn't find it that fun to play. It was one of the first 3D platformers out there. The DualShock controller wasn't released yet, so it was going to have its flaws. It's certainly a better game than Way of the Warrior. I say stick with these two instead. This one's more of a novelty. But to end this review on a high note, once again, happy 20th anniversary, Crash. Let's hope these remakes will be treated with the respect they deserve.